friends, it's Lex at LexReads, and today I'm going to be going through 3 thrillers that I recently read, and I'm going to be reviewing them for you. And the 3 thrillers that I'm going to be reviewing in this video are An Anonymous Girl by Greer Hendricks and Sarah Pekkanen, 8 Perfect Murders by Peter Swanson, and An Unwanted Guest by Sherry Lupina. Let's just do it. This is the first book from this duo that I've read, and I feel like I should mention that just so that you know. I haven't read The Wife Between Us or their newest one that just came out, but I own both of them, and I do plan on reading both of them, so I'll let you know what I think when I finish those. This book takes place in New York City following Jess, who is a makeup artist in her late 20s, who is in need of some cash, so she participates in a psychological study with Dr. Shields. The study is on ethics and morality, and as the study goes on, it becomes more and more invasive and dangerous, and by the closing of the book, she doesn't know who to trust. Our protagonist is also harboring a pretty big secret that plays into the book. It's pretty important. So, yes, that's what this book is about. First, I'm going to talk about the things that I liked about this book. I really enjoyed how fast-paced this read is. I read it in, I think, less than 24 hours. I picked it up and then finished it the next day. And it's a psychological thriller, so it's less like scary, spooky, on the edge of my seat, and more like, you know, I just wanted to untangle the web of like lies and deceit and intrigue that had been sewn throughout the story, and I just wanted to like keep peeling back layers, and that's something that I really enjoy doing in a thriller. I also really like Jess as a protagonist. I think she's likable, although I could definitely see why people wouldn't necessarily like her very much. But I think her secret and her motivations and what she wants are very believable. I think it adds a lot to the story. I liked reading from her perspective. And then on the flip side, because there are dual perspectives in this book, I really enjoyed how unnerving Dr. Shields' sections were. And I also really enjoyed the use of second person. I know that is not everyone's thing, but I am a sucker for a good use of second person perspective. You know, so when a book is like you walk to the door and you look, you know, I love that. I love that. It's one of my favorite things when it's done well. It's sometimes done very poorly, but I think it was done very well in this book. The climax, the like unraveling, is solid. It's not my favorite. It's not my absolute least favorite. But in books like these, you know, I feel like a lot of times it's less of like a big reveal and more of a like, finally everything falls into place. Like there's not often, like it wasn't like a plot twist. There's not like a big plot twist at the end. It's more just like the final explanation of all of the things, the final untangling of the web of lies, so to say. And I thought it was good. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't my favorite, but I really enjoyed it. Also, it's very light on violence and gore, so if that's not something you like in a thriller, this might be a thriller for you. It's more intended to make you think about the questions that both Jess and Dr. Shields are posing, more than like, someone got stabbed in the chest, you know, like that's not really what's happening here, but it's a fun read. All right, now we're going to talk about some more critical stuff. I'm going to start with some content warnings. I'm going to read them. I have a little list here. So, content warnings for suicide, sexual assault, death, and mentioned drug misuse. So those are some things to be aware of if you're going into this book. One thing that I was not a super huge fan of in this book is how heavy-handed the theme was. So, you know, the theme is morality, like the idea of like, should scorned people be able to get revenge, like, you know, things like that, but it's kind of hammered over your head over and over and over again. It comes up like every other page. So if you like subtlety in your narratives, there's not a whole lot of that here. There are 2 points of view, which I know not everyone likes. I like multiple POVs. so it did not bother me. If you don't like multiple POVs, don't pick up this book. Something about this thriller read as not very believable to me. So if you like a thriller that is, it's grounded in reality, but there are just some things that seem just like a little bit off the wall. So I had to suspend my disbelief a couple times. And if that's not something you like to do at all in your thriller, you also might kind of not love that aspect. But all in all, I think this one was a very enjoyable read. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads, and I do recommend it if you like psychological thrillers. The next book we're going to talk about is An Unwanted Guest by Sherry Lupina. I don't have my physical copy with me. It is trapped up in Laramie, and I'm not allowed to go get anything from my house in Laramie because they're on lockdown. So I'll just put a picture up here the whole time I'm talking about it. So if you want to skip through this one, you'll see where the picture changes or goes away. This book is an Agatha Christie-esque, bottleneck locked room mystery. It is pretty much a textbook whodunit, which, if you don't know, I absolutely love whodunits. That's one of my favorite, genres of thriller mysteries, is the whodunit. This one takes place in upstate New York at a locally owned hotel. It's bigger than a bed and breakfast, but it's not like a hotel. They have 12 rooms, but only 6 of them are filled in the weekend or so that this takes place. So we have a cast of, I want to say, 11 unique different characters stuck here. There's an ice storm. The power cuts out, there is no way for them to get back to town, and all of a sudden, a dead body pops up. It looks like it could be an accident, so they're cautious but not afraid, and then a second dead body turns up. So one of the people there is a murderer, and it goes through the classic, going through all the people trying to find the murderer. It's a fun one. The characters in this one, I really liked them all. I thought they were all really interesting. They're kind of archetypal. We have an older couple whose marriage is crumbling. We have a couple that's just been married. We have the reclusive writer that is just observing. We have, is he an attorney or a detective? He's either an attorney or a detective who's kind of mysterious. We have a wide-eyed ingenue type. This is written in such a way that it was very easy for me to keep all of the characters apart. And I know sometimes in big cast, murder mysteries, it can get kind of hard to keep track of all the characters. But this one, it was so easy because they're all so very unique. They all have different voices. It's also multiple POVs, so we get to read from, if not all, then most of their perspectives throughout the book. And I think that added a lot to the story. While this one is compelling, it didn't feel to me like a page-turner. I could set it down for a day or two, and I didn't feel like I had to know and I had to finish this story. But it is pretty well crafted. I really enjoyed the twists. I really enjoyed reading from the different perspectives and trying to figure out who the murderer was. I had a couple guesses by the end of who I thought that the murderer was, and the culprit was one of my 2 guesses, so I wasn't surprised, but I do think it's fun in whodunits when, if it's spun well enough, I'm not angry if I'm not surprised. If the narrative is well written, I'm not angry if I figure it out. I think that sometimes is the mark of a good narrative, when you can figure out who the murderer is in a murder mystery. I think it means that they laid enough clues in there, but I had another guess, so I wasn't 100% sure. So they laid in just enough clues for me to be I think it's so-and-so, yes, I don't know what else to say about that. I don't know how else to verbalize. Ooh, weird. I rated it 4 out of 5 stars because while it was a really fun read, I think it is by no means a perfect read. It got a little slow in sections. There were some sections that were a little bit repetitive. And I would definitely recommend this one to anyone who likes a good Clue-like classic atmospheric whodunit. If that is your thing, pick up this book. I think you will enjoy it as much as I did, if not more. But if you dislike a large cast of characters, multiple point of views, or the locked room trope, maybe skip out on this one. Next up, we have 8 Perfect Murders by, Peter Swanson. Sorry, I forgot his name. 8 Perfect Murders follows a bookshop owner in Boston who is approached by an FBI agent after she has started noticing a string of murders that are based off of a list he published on the bookstore's blog about a decade earlier, about 8 perfect murders in crime fiction. So the things that I liked about this premise, the first time I heard this premise, I fell in love. I think the idea of this is so fun and so clever and so wild, and I just had to pick it up. I think it was executed a little not the way that I wanted it to be. I don't know how to say that well. It wasn't executed as well as I think it could have been executed, but the premise itself is just so good. Your girl loves an unreliable narrator, and this book has that. Our protagonist, there are a few times in the book, it's first in his perspective, first person, the bookstore owner, and he admits a few times in the narrative to lying to you as the reader, and then will tell you the truth, but it becomes really easy by the middle of the book to just not trust anything that he says, and I know that that's kind of polarizing. Some people don't like unreliable narrators. I love a good unreliable narrator, one of my favorite tropes, so I was happy about that. The twists were pretty well done. Unfortunately, I read this thriller directly after another thriller that I'm not going to say because I don't want to spoil this or that if you've read one and not the other. But the twist was basically the same, which isn't a bad thing. I just think I would have enjoyed this more if I hadn't read it directly after that one, because I saw the ending coming from a million miles away, because it was the same twist as the last one, so I was seeing the same little Easter eggs, and I was like, oh, it's so-and-so. Also, I got spoiled on one of the big reveals. There are 2 big reveals in this book, and the first one was spoiled for me. I don't mind spoilers, so it didn't ruin the book or anything, but I do think I wouldn't have been surprised even if I hadn't known. Okay, I'm gonna read your content warnings for you, okay? So we have murder. Hella spoilers in this book. If you want to read any of the 8 books that are on the 8 Perfect Murders list, maybe read that book before you read this one, because I skipped entire sections of chapters because they were talking about a secret history, which is on my TBR, and I didn't want to ruin a secret history. So there are entire pages that I just didn't read because I didn't want to ruin a secret history. So beware of that. We also have violence, adultery, drug abuse, alcohol abuse, and suicide. So lots of content warnings on that one. So the entire time I was reading this book, I was like, there's something that I don't like, and I couldn't figure out what it was. And if you watched my First Owls TBR video, which I will link down below, it was my First Owls vlog, I read it. I said a few times I almost DNF'd this book because there was something about it that I didn't like, and I could not put my finger on it. I couldn't figure out what about this book was pissing me off. It was the narrator's voice. It wasn't the story that was the problem, it was the way that the narrator was presenting the information. Hello, it's Editing Alex, in case you couldn't tell. Welcome to my bed. So I just realized that when my card was full, I thought it was just full for the outro. I was wrong. So I'm gonna finish up this review here from bed. So basically what I was saying is that, it took me forever to figure out what specifically I didn't like about this book, and I decided that it was the narrator's voice. He's very cut and dry, very matter of fact. He'll wake up and be like, I woke up and had a cup of coffee, and looked at my bedside table where my 4 poetry books were sitting. On top of it was the ABC Murders by Agatha Christie. Like, it was just very matter of fact, but also he was kind of pretentious all of the time, which normally neither of those two things bother me as much as they did in this book, and I'm not sure why they bothered me as much as they did in this book. It took me like 3.5 days to get through this book, which is really not normal for me in a thriller. Usually once I like pick up a thriller, I'm like into it, I'm invested, I want to know, I want to keep going. But this one felt like an eternity while I was reading it. It felt like forever, and it's only about 270 pages. But it was kind of hard for me to get through, which was a bummer, which is part of the reason I rated it 3 out of 5 stars. I was only really hooked and really into it for the last like 70 pages. So I spent the first 3/4 of the book just like wanting it to be over. I considered DNFing it a few times, which if you watched my Owls video, I think I already said this. It's in that, so I'll link it down below. Sorry, I'm reading my notes because now I'm kind of all like jumbled. I think I would have enjoyed it more had I not read it immediately after the other one where the twist was the same. If you like procedural mysteries, so if you like following FBI agents or detectives or investigators, like if you like following the investigation of a case, this might be a good book for you. That is not something that I'm typically into, so I didn't love that aspect of this, because while we're not following an FBI agent or anything like that, we are following a case in a way that we don't in some other thrillers. So if you like that, this really might be a book for you. But unfortunately, like, I don't not recommend this book, but I don't strongly recommend this book. If the premise intrigues you and it sounds like something you'll like, I do recommend you pick it up. But it was not my favorite thriller that I've read in a hot minute. But yeah, thank you for coming and hanging out with me. I hope you enjoyed this video. Go down below, let me know what you think about any of these books. Yeah, I will see you guys tomorrow. Thank you for hanging out with me. It's been a great time. Goodbye, friends. Mwah.